Okay, so it is 5:34. I'm going to call the Town of Morristown Selectboard meeting to order. It is Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Do we have any changes or additions?
No.
Okay. Community comments. I'd invite members of the public to come forward, and I would remind members of the public to please identify yourself and also please try to keep your comments to items that are not on the agenda. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kay Lovell. I'm here with concerns about the Morristown Police Department. 2 weeks ago at Memorial Court, Chief of Morristown Police Department, Jason Luno, testified under oath that he spent the last 6 months to 2 years regularly and repeatedly visiting the Facebook page of a female-bodied resident of the town while he was at work. He's testified that this activity was his official duty. He testified that he visited this person's page so frequently that he was able to characterize it in detail, saying, "It varies. Most recently, it's been almost daily. If you back up a couple months, there would be a week or two with nothing, and then there would be a bunch. So there really isn't a consistent pattern." That's what he said. He testified that he took screenshots of this person's content, copied them onto a Word document, printed them, collected them into a 3-ring binder, all while at work. He then provided this binder to a private citizen to use against the owner of the Facebook content. That private citizen is an employee of Morristown Police Department. The town, through its attorney, said that there was no documentation of either reasonable suspicion or probable cause for this activity. This resident also lives alone across the street from the police department. This person is also a witness in pending criminal charges in which their testimony counters that of the police. This person reached out to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, who suggested that these activities by the Morristown Police Department were criminal obstruction of justice, as their activities were intimidating to the witness whose social media content was surveilled, monitored, and collected by Morristown Police Department and provided to a private citizen for use in private litigation against the witness. This is your employees. These are your employees.
Thank you, Kay. Do I have any other comments from the public?
Could I make a suggestion? Kay, would you like to leave your written testimony with us to be part of
I will
the?
email it to all of you, as I have tried to do for the past 2 years,
Okay,
and been ignored over and over again.
Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? Okay, I'm going to move on. Minutes. We have minutes from May 19th, 2025, and I'll just remind the board that you have a revised version of those minutes in your packet, and the revision has to do with new business on the 19th under number 3, street treats, and I believe the issue is that the original minutes talked about the tabling of that discussion. Since there was no tabling of that discussion, the new minutes, I wasn't there, George wasn't there, but since there was no tabling of the discussion, the new minutes reflect the fact that there was no action taken, there was no tabling. So I would entertain a motion for those new minutes.
I would move the minutes of May 19th, 2025.
I'll second. I have a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Any other discussion regarding the minutes?
Yeah, we'll get to that. I thought they had agreed to table. That's why
Okay.
we didn't vote. I think, may I speak on real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Judy. Yeah.
So, Judy Alberry, I think what I did is the minutes, the way I wrote them, sounded like a decision, like a motion was made, because there was a decision, but it wasn't. They were just tabled for the next meeting. So there was no motion, and it sounded like I was missing a motion, so I corrected it.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, the end result, it's a great, you know, we talked about this before the meeting, and the end result is the same.
It's technicality though.
Yep, right. So just wanted the minutes to reflect what happened. Okay, any other discussion regarding the minutes from May 19th? Okay, all those in favor of the minutes, approving the minutes from May 19th, 2025, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be 3 ayes and 2 abstentions. Okay, thank you very much. New business. LCPC is here. Tasha Wallace and Seth Jensen are here, and they're going to do a presentation for us, so welcome,
Great,
folks.
thank you so much. We'll use the microphone, but I think we'll be darting over to the map later as well, if that works okay for you.
Can you take the microphone with you, because it comes off? Is that possible? That would be amazing.
There you go. The answer
We're
is
not going over
yes.
to the map yet. This feels kind of like one of those TV shows now. So, great, why don't you hold this for a sec. So, we're gonna talk about 2 things this evening. First, are the housing targets for the town of Morristown through Act 47 that was passed a couple of years ago. And then we are going to talk about Morristown's future land use map. We are required to make changes to our regional and local land use maps as a result of the legislation passed last year, the Act 250 Reform Bill. So I'll start with the housing targets, and I have copies for each of you. Do you have them in your packet or
No.
them around? Okay, so, and Act 47 was included in that act was the direction that the state would conduct a housing needs assessment. And after that housing needs assessment, they would establish regional housing targets for regions around the state. And then the local planning, regional planning commissions were to create targets for each community. These are aspirational goals as a result of the state's severe housing crisis, but these are not, there are not repercussions to the town if you do not meet these aspirational goals. You are required to, next time you update your town plan, to include these goals in your town plan with a discussion. And that discussion can talk about how you choose, are aiming to meet them, any challenges that you face. And we're really here to talk about your reaction to these goals. Now, the regional planning commissions were given some discretion in how we allocated these goals across communities. And as you know, in Lamoille, we have communities that are very different, some very small, very rural, some larger. So we just allocated the goals based on existing population. You'll see there's a low goal for 2030 and a high goal for 2030, and then a low goal for 2050 and a higher goal. These are housing units, so they could be single-family homes, apartments, etc. Duplexes. Anything you want to add to that?
So just to reiterate how these goals were developed, the state housing need assessment developed these targets for each region and then left it to the regional planning commissions to decide how to divide those by municipality within the region. Some regions developed more complex formulas based on existing size of community, existing infrastructure. Chittenden County, for example, has a fairly complex formula. Due to the scale of Lamoille County and just the value judgment that would be required to develop a formula, it seemed the fairest way was to use existing population and maintain the current distribution of population across the municipalities. And so you'll see that reflected in the table that is in front of you. And because this question has come up in other communities, this is all housing. This is not specifically referring to publicly subsidized housing, housing of certain income levels. This is all types of housing, all values of housing, all configurations. So single family, multifamily, senior housing, accessory units would all go toward this. And again, finally, to reiterate, it's aspirational and a way to track what is going on. If your municipal plan, when you do update it next, could outline policies for meeting it, as well as barriers, why you feel it may not be, if you feel it may not be attainable, or if you feel certain types of investment should be prioritized by your local policies.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to start with a question, an observation and a question, and the observation is not going to startle anybody. Morristown is the largest population-wise town in the county, followed very closely by Stowe. And when you, this is 2020 data, so this has changed a little bit, certainly, probably for both towns. It certainly has for Morristown. And then the current number of houses, Morrisville is much bigger. I don't think Morristown, population-wise, the bigger than Stowe. Stowe is second, but the number of houses in Stowe is substantially more. Now, that's not necessarily a surprise, but it does beg the question, or did for me anyways, what's the definition of a house? So for the purposes of all this data, it's
a housing unit, again.
It's a housing unit.
So it's a house or an apartment or a condo or half of a duplex. So whatever is an individual unit that could be sold or rented for an individual or more than one individual to live in.
So we have a couple of buildings in town I can think of that have in excess of 100 housing units. They would be added in the hundreds, not as one.
Correct, yes.
So some aspects of this have changed quite a bit since 2020.
Correct.
Yeah.
But again, that we needed to use the
Right.
data presented to us and to do the best we could under that circumstance.
Yeah.
But we fully understand that it's changed and things are gonna change over time.
Yeah.
When we get to 2030, some communities might be closer to meeting achieving their 2050 targets and some
Right.
not as close. This is really a construct to help communities really think about how to add housing in the face of a housing crisis across the state.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a comment. I live in a neighborhood and there have been 3 houses sitting empty for years. There are now 2 on the market that are not selling. And what I'm hearing from realtors and people that are looking at them, it all goes back to the appraisal, that everything is appraised so high and the taxes are so high. So given that when this was done, there was a huge demand. So how do we address I'm talking to a lot of people who are planning to move because of the taxes. So while these are great goals, how do we address that if, with everything that's going on, if all of a sudden we're flooded with houses that won't sell? How are we gonna, and why build all this housing if it's not selling?
So, great question, and the answer, I think, is those are the things that, when you come around to updating your town plan, that your planning commission should work with staff, and actually Tyler came and met with all of the LCPC staff last week, and, so the planning commission can have those discussions, and the select board can have those discussions, because there's probably some units that might not sell and different types of units that could be very popular as things change.
Do you think there's anticipation that there'll be another evaluation, or do you not plan to do one of these big studies again until 2050?
Well, remember, everyone updates their plans every 8 years, so
Right.
I anticipate that the state is gonna try and keep up with that and do another assessment at some point down the road, absolutely.
Okay, thank
That
you.
would make sense.
And just for the record, Tasha referred to Tyler Mesha, our new zoning administrator, who's in the audience right now. So for those of you that haven't met him yet, there he is. Any other questions?
Yeah, Tasha, I'm just curious, in an article I read a few weeks ago, it showed a net population difference in the whole state of Vermont in terms, terms of population of almost being a net zero. And I guess my question is, in looking at these additional units, is it the state's impression that all of these communities within our county or across the state are going to grow enough when we're really not seeing that data up to this point?
Well, a couple of things. Lamoille County has actually been one of the fastest growing counties in the state for some time, behind Chittenden, of course. And it's kind of a chicken and egg thing that we hear from employers in our region and our colleagues around the state here, that people can't get employees because they can't find a place to live. And when we hire young staff, they struggle to find places to live. A couple of years ago, we hired a young person. It took several months for them to find a rental, and they had considered rejecting the job offer after a couple of months when they got discouraged. So it is really a challenge. And what's the rate of Lamoille County growth? Do you remember? I'll put you on the spot.
Oh, jeez. It's not as high as it was from 2020 to 2010.
Yeah, it's slowing down.
Yeah.
It was in the 3 or 4%, which is, Chittenden County is higher, but
Yeah, I mean, there are counties with zero or negative growth.
we were
Yeah.
one of the positive growth counties.
Okay, thanks.
Richard? I'm good. George?
The data collection is, I'm trying to work how COVID plays into all of this, and it's clearly I think, at least, I don't know if the data bears it out, there was a lot of in-migration during COVID, or in rental during COVID, as people felt this to be a safer place than others, and then we get the growth in remote work that is post-COVID. Does this data take that into consideration in any way?
The data is from 2020, so it doesn't, but it's certainly, again, things that town planning commissions should talk about, and talk about your knowledge of your local community when you have those discussions. I know that the remote work thing will also be influenced by the fact that Lamoille Fiber has now, extended their network throughout the county. So I think those are discussions you'll have to have. I mean, you hear a lot of, things, but I think that your new staff can really help you gather some of that data to have a robust discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions in the audience for Tasha or Seth before they move on to another topic?
Great.
Tasha, she's going to need the microphone.
She's gonna
Oh,
Yeah.
Judy, yes, please, yes, I think I might know.
Thank you. Judy Bickford, and there isn't a housing assessment from May of 2024. And part of that housing assessment by the Doug Kennedy advisors was that people, the elderly, some of the elderly want to move out of their large homes. There's no place for them to go. A lot of young people don't want to buy a house. They want to rent. So those are some of the obstacles or options we have to consider when we're talking about these things. So it isn't just building a house or building an apartment complex. There's a lot more going into that than meets the eye.
Thank you, Judy.
Is there someone else? Should I put it back on the stand?
Yeah.
So,
I'll take it right back in touch.
Thanks.
I came as well to support these guys, but one of the things that I see missing, both at the state level and at the county level, is accurate data. And a lot of your questions around how accurate is the data we're working with. The only place we get data is from here, or from the federal government. So I think it's put upon us, even on a volunteer basis or on a community committee basis. We have a great place to have conversations down the street. During the summer, we could have some, rallies around what do we need, what do we want to see. I think Judy's especially right about the elderly. I'm a perfect example of that. There aren't enough places made properly for the elderly. Doesn't matter who's elderly, whether they moved in to hide from the city, they're here now, and we're responsible for them. The same is true of young families. Again, probably from away. And from the renters I talked to, especially in the park, the gardeners, new people in town, they moved from Montpelier, they moved from Burlington and Georgia because the rent was about $500 cheaper here. They're very happy with $2,000 to $2,500 rents. Absolutely wonderful compared to where they were. And they don't have to drive to Burlington or Montpelier either. So there's a lot of what is new and built that's not getting to satisfy what we had for a need when it was proposed. And again, I don't know how to do it. I'd like to be part of it, but to keep an open conversation within the community to create newer or more relevant data for these guys and or the state to use before the next 8-year study or the 10-year, or is it 10 years or 20 years they do the census, you know? We need to keep our records up even around building permits and, you know, community events around who lives here, who doesn't, why do they live here? Just simple questions around community events that are probably already happening. I think it would help the business people as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. It's worth noting Judy and Dan are our town representatives at LCPC as well. Any other comments from the audience or the board? I would say you can have the floor again.
All right, and I'll just give you these, thank you so much. And,
School, take one and pass it along.
should I, now I don't know where to go, I'll go back to sitting down. But can everyone hear me if I'm sitting down okay? Okay.
That's, that microphone is for there, not for this room.
That's, oh, okay, all right. I feel like I should wave to them all. Thanks. So the other thing we want to talk about is Act 181, which is the Act 250 reform bill that passed last year. Now, you've probably heard all sorts of different bits and pieces about this legislation, but Act 181 has significantly changed our work at the Regional Planning Commission for a number of reasons. One, it used to be that our board would adopt our regional plan and then it was set. Now our regional plan needs to go to the new Land Use Review Board for approval. That's a new Act 250 board. And we need to update our future land use maps, which we include in that plan. And the state has defined the categories that we use to draw these land use maps. Now, traditionally, when we build our land use map that goes into the plan, we visit with communities to make sure that the Morristown part of the land use map is based on the community's interests and desires. And we look forward to working with Tyler. We spent a lot of time working with Stowe's staff on their draft. But it is a bit of heavy lift because we now have categories that are slightly different from our old categories, and we have to map by parcel. Before it was a little more free-form in the drawing. So we're here tonight to talk about what we've come up with so far for Morristown and talk about working with you to fill in all the blanks. You'll see that your draft map has a lot of white area. Those are areas that we want to talk with you about filling in. So Seth, do you want to walk through what we've got on their map so far?
Sure. Do you want me to actually get up and point at the map?
Sure, you can do that. They have an owl, yes.
They do have an owl. So as Tasha explained, with this new act, all of the regional planning commissions need to use the same land use areas on the future land use map. That is different from the prior statute where the areas were developed based on each region and each region's deliberation with our board and communities. So I'm going to step back to the last regional plan update back in 2016, very briefly, just to outline the future land use map as it exists today was based on trying to or review all of the land use areas and zoning districts of the 10 towns and 5 villages in the region and create a map that worked for all of the communities based on their local maps. We're now going to go through the process of trying to translate that process into these future land use areas. So 2 things to keep in mind. We do need to use these specific areas. As the Regional Planning Commission, we're going to try to work with each community to fit your planning efforts as best into these categories as possible. And that is why there is a lot of white, undefined space on this current draft, is because we want to have that detailed discussion with you as the select board, with your staff, and with the planning commission to make sure we are interpreting your areas correctly. So I'm going to start sort of quickly going through what those areas are. 3 rural areas and 3 specific rural areas. I usually spend most of my time on those rural areas because to date we've met with the more rural communities where that has been the topic of discussion. The state has outlined a rural conservation area, which on the Lamoille County map is going to be limited to state-owned state forest land rather than depicting private property as conservation. The other area is the rural working land, ag and forestry, and that's this larger parcels. Generally parcels in current use are large enough to be actively used for ag and forestry. And then the final being the rural general, which we anticipate being, you know, the more rural residential neighborhoods. Moving all the way to the other end, statute also outlines village center areas and downtown center areas. And that is taking some of the role of the downtown designation program and that your board has discussed in the past. The downtown and village core, where your civic, commercial, residential core is located. Something you'll have the opportunity to do is, with the future land use mapping process, is to potentially have more flexibility in that boundary than you currently have.
And just for a pause for a sec,
Yeah.
but we do recommend that.
Microphone.
Yeah.
When you go through this current downtown designation application, that you stick with the existing boundaries that you had with your prior designation, and then we move on to these opportunities for expansion, because it's very important that you have a baseline in order to then achieve the broader expansion.
And to that point, continuing forward momentum with that designation will almost certainly help with this land use review process. It will be more difficult to make the case for an expanded downtown if there's no downtown currently designated. So that is just more of the rationale for what Tasha said, moving forward with the prior boundary, getting the designation in place, and then having the discussion about more flexibility if you have questions about the edges of that boundary. The next area of likely interest for Morristown, and the area that is not depicted at all, is the planned growth area. That is the area that is, or areas that are in addition to your core downtown, where you may be anticipating further growth and development that is served by water and sewer. So in other communities that have local zoning, we've worked closely with the local staff to understand which districts and which planning areas make sense. In that, we'll anticipate doing that again, sorry. And that could be areas, for example, the areas where your special use area up by Copley, your North End area, and other areas in that general vicinity. We have not depicted those here because on this draft, we want to make sure we have a proper understanding of the goals of your local zoning before doing so. That's the bottom one. And then also of interest, the enterprise areas, those are your gravel pits, industrial parks. We've followed on this map the areas that were depicted as enterprise on the current future land use map that was developed based on input from the town at that time. That could be adjusted as we go through this process. And there are other areas that are potentially less important in Morristown, but region-wide, very important. The village centers and village areas, similar to the, you can potentially include areas that do not have both water and sewer, but are planned for growth as a village area as opposed versus an area planned for growth. I am going to pause for a second. I think that was about 30 pages of statute just thrown at you. If you have any questions now.
I do have a question,
Yes.
because you're standing right next to our current,
Yep.
because I was on zoning and DRB, and so, we rural residential, so is that going to be incorporated, or is that terminology all gone?
So, I guess we could both speak to this, but I'll try to do it quickly.
Yeah.
So first of all, that this is a land use map for the regional plan, okay? So it's fully expected that a town with zoning would have a much greater level of detail.
Yeah.
And nothing will take that away from the community. What we're trying to do is just zoom upwards and incorporate what you're envisioning there into this new framework required by the state.
So going forward, we could have two different definitions of the area, is that true? One based on this and one based on our
Yes.
zoning?
Yes, you'd have your zoning map, sorry.
I'm just curious how, yeah.
Tyler has a thought, so I'm gonna give him, since he works
Just
for
'cause
you, I'm gonna
yeah.
give him the
Just because I
microphone.
know the mindset that,
Yeah.
you're so used to, lower residential and that, and so it's like,
Tyler Macia, zoning administrator, so sorry for just jumping in on that, but as we were sitting here thinking about that too, that if we do get to a rewrite of the zoning regulations, it may make some sense to adopt at least some of the districts and stuff like that too. I think to help maybe alleviate some potential confusion between people looking at two different sets of maps and not necessarily being sure what that is, and trying to make it more user-friendly. I'm not sure, again, just off the cuff, how well these would necessarily match exactly what we got. The tricky part would be in the village area where we have the bulk of our different districts.
Yeah.
So that could maybe be its own thing, but it's something that, I could bring up to the planning commission and see if it's something they would be interested in adopting that and just having rather than having a whole set of our own standalone, maybe we adopt some of the, or most of the LCPC, the state designations, and then we could have for the village area where we really kind of get into it in the nitty gritty. We may have some additional ones, but it's something we can look at.
I'm just
if
thinking
there's
somebody
appetite.
trying to come and get a permit, and it's like, okay, based on our zoning law, it's a rural residential, but then, that's all, just curious what we we're looking at going forward.
So I think, Laura, that's a really good question. In terms of two pieces, sort of the terminology and then the area, that we have tried in other towns that do have zoning to have the boundaries of the area plan for growth or village area as close as possible under statute to the districts, and then you would kind of consider the regional plan map as the 30,000-foot view, and then the detailed is your map. So that to try to minimize those kind of potential conflicts as much as possible, and confusion.
Yeah.
Good questions. Yep.
And do people have questions about this, because there's another element?
Yeah, go ahead, George.
I may be jumping the gun, please feel free to say, not now. The transition infill, which is here but not shown on that map yet, because you haven't got there yet. I think of a lot of single-family homes that sit on a reasonable amount of land, define that as what you will. that could be infilled if they chose to put a duplex on there. I'm not saying they would. How does that infill kind of get tracked when you've got one landowner
Yeah.
and space for a house, but not necessarily desire for infill property?
So thank you for asking about the transition infill area. That's one of the areas that has more flexibility. It's outlined in statute as really two things, sort of the existing kind of roadside commercial development where a community may be targeting, redevelopment to reduce the sort of sprawl effect, or more greenfield areas that are outside of floodplains where housing could be developed. We have been using it in communities sort of to outline those areas where there may be a future infrastructure expansion in the future, or the community may consider, bylaw or planning amendments to have more moderate changes in density, but are not the same as, going to like a downtown or, village neighborhood. So certainly if there are areas like that in Morristown that could be considered as a village, as a transition zone. Important to remember, in all of these maps, the landowner is ultimately the first decider of what happens. There's nothing in these maps that could be compelled someone who has a big backyard, who wants to keep it a big backyard, to develop it. And there's no intention of using it in that way. But that's, when we're having conversations in, the more rural communities where there's no water or septic infrastructure, probably where a lot of their housing goals are going to come from are subdivision of those, 5-acre parcels into 2-acre parcels. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Further questions about the map before I do the grand finale a little bit?
Well, it just seems to me that, the map on the left is the macro view and the map on the right is the micro view. And at the end of the day, decisions are going to be made on the right-hand micro view versus the left-hand macro view. And whether you label it this way on your legend, or as the town of Morristown currently has it in their zoning bylaws, in terms of districts, at the end of the day, the decisions locally are going to be made locally, and you are fulfilling the need for the state to fill in the blanks in that macro view. Is that correct?
That's well put, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, right. I think that is really important, that we are, really focused on, you have your zoning in your districts, and we're pulling that into the macro view. I do want to add a couple of things. One is, we are under a tight timeline. We have to have our new regional plan fully approved by the Land Use Review Board by the end of 2027. Because of that complex process, the end of 2026, I take that back. And because of all of the public hearings built into our adoption process and the Land Use Review Board's process and everything, we need to have this map done by the end of December 2025 in order to make our regional plan work. So we really appreciate you working with us. Our plan is to meet with Tyler and Brent and fill in a bunch of blanks and come back to you and talk about it some more. The other thing we haven't touched on is that in Act 181, there is a tier system. And if this town chooses, again, it will be your decision, your process, you will have the opportunity to apply for something called Tier 1B. And Tier 1B comes with a variety of exemptions to facilitate development in your core, in the area surrounding your core, such as Act 250 exemptions. So we are happy to have that discussion another day, because I know we've taken a lot of your time, but that is another piece of this legislation.
Thank you. provide information about why Tier 1B, not Tier 1A, and just like a brief summary with the, what does that mean for everybody here?
Sure, so there's 3 tiers, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Tier 1 is the only one that's divided into A and B. A is pretty much the cities, so, and Seth knows more about the details of what you need to have to qualify for Tier 1B and the benefits.
Yeah, so Tier 1B, essentially the requirements for Tier 1B are that you have local zoning and subdivision, which Morristown, of course, has, that there be the availability of water or sewer infrastructure, and you have both, at least in the central part of the community. And then the overlap is that the Tier 1B follows the boundaries of the downtown and village center area plan for growth or village area. That does not mean that by depicting a downtown and area plan for growth, you're automatically in the Tier 1B. It means you're eligible for consideration if the community wants to do that. But that's how these two processes talk to each other. In a Tier 1B area, the threshold for Act 250 jurisdiction increases from 10 units to 50 units. So a project that is proposed still has to go through your full local review process, still needs to get your zoning process, still needs to get the sewer and water connections and the state stormwater permits and all of those. But Act 250 itself doesn't kick in until 50 or more units. So the goal of that is to enable communities that have the administrative capacity and the infrastructure capacity to have more sort of the missing middle, moderate-sized building that is difficult, has been difficult to do. And again, fully a local decision if that's the right thing for Morristown. But, will be Phase B of this discussion. That was an attempt at a joke that no one laughed at. But, and the reason for, the reason, as Tasha mentioned, Tier 1A comes with a lot of other, requirements like height, for example, like some additional zoning standards that seem more tailored toward like a, Montpelier type setting. And the main difference is rather than a 50 unit, exemption up to 50 units, all projects in a Tier 1A are exempt. And there's just been so few, honestly, proposals above that in communities of our scale. And, the Barrie, Montpelier, Burlington is a different story. But based on your current zoning, your current planning, the tier, and as has been articulated to us by you, the Planning Commission, your board members, like Tier 1B seems, or Tier 1A doesn't seem like the right fit for Morristown, where Tier 1B seems like in the realm of consideration.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Comments? Audience? Go ahead.
Terrific, you're up. Okay.
You're up again?
Thank you both. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and filling us in with all this, keeping us informed. This is great. And thank you sounds like you've been working with Tyler already, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of conversations coming up.
We can leave them out here for, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Tasha. Thanks, Seth. Okay, moving on. New business number 2, the consideration to sign an agreement with the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department. So we have in our packet a statement from the Lamoille County Sheriffs. They do all of our dispatch work. Correct me if I go wrong here anywhere, Jason, but our chief of police is in the room. They are asking for dispatch for a sum of $160,199, which is slightly higher than budgeted. In fact, it's $2,300 above, approximately $2,300 above, that's not exact. So this has been brought to our attention, and I think we are looking for a motion to assign that agreement with the Lamoille County Sheriff's Office. So I will just open that up to the board. Maybe if somebody wants to make a motion and we can second that, we can have further discussion.
So, excuse me, I'll move to sign the agreement for the provision of services by Lamoille County Sheriff's Department as presented.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion by Chris and a second by George. So further discussion.
I think originally when we were putting together the budget, Tina got an approximation of what the percentage increase was going to be. And I think on $161,000 or $160,200 dispatch agreement, coming in within $2,300 is pretty close.
Commendable, yeah.
Yeah, so I wish there were other options to compare it to. It's that is not a new statement by me or a conversation that we've had, but at this point, it is what it is.
Yep. And we've had this very similar conversation in this room in the past too, so this is not new to us. Other discussion?
Just curious, is this a union position?
Is this a union
Is
position?
this a union position? Just curious.
At dispatch?
This is Lamoille County,
Yeah,
so
just curious, because
their
everything's
dispatcher
switched over.
positions might be union or no?
I'm
Are
hearing,
any of them union?
Yeah, I don't think,
our chief of police is nodding no in the back of the
I don't
room.
think that any of the sheriffs are, yeah.
They're not union.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Just curious,
They are not union positions.
thank you.
What's the,
Okay,
what's the percent of the increase roughly, do we know, from over last year?
It's about 1.5%? Oh,
4.5?
We're at 4.5 and we budgeted. Oh,
sorry, I was thinking about the 2,300, but.
Right. We were considering CPI originally, and that's sort of the indication that they gave us.
We're in there.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
I think the original budget had 3.5 in it. The increase in,
Okay, yeah, I just wondered what the increase was, the total increase was.
yes,
but it does come out to about
Projected.
$2,300. George?
Yeah, thanks. One, I would follow up and say this kind of differential between a budget that's built 6 months ahead of time
yeah.
and trying to estimate a number this size, I would totally agree with Chris. This is well budgeted, it's slightly above, but it's not, the budgeting process was good. The question I want to ask, and I don't know if it's Jason or it's Brent, is item 6 that talks about the $8,009.95 that is the administrative component of this. The way I read it, it seems to contradict itself, but I just need to get my head around it. Second sentence says, this administrative fee does not increase the total cost of services and shall be paid to the sheriff. So is the 8,000, let's call it 8,000, let's knock off the $9.95, is that within the 160,000 or is that up and above it?
I might be able to answer that, if you give me a moment.
Sure.
Or if Chief knows it off the top of his head, he can feel free.
Fairly confident it's within that 160,000.
Yes.
It's within the 160? Okay.
So for those online that might not have heard that, it's within the $160,000.
So it's an
Yeah,
allocation of.
Thank you.
Right, because it doesn't stipulate that it's in addition.
No, that's,
Good question.
yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion before us. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous, Judy. Thank you. Okay, number 3, to approve the 2025-2026 tax anticipation note. Sarah? Sarah Haskins?
Sarah Haskins, Town Treasurer. This is something we do annually. We take out a tax anticipation loan based on cash flow projections for the following year that Tina and I work on together. A few years ago, the Select Board made a motion to make the Union Bank the sole source provider because they're the only ones that offer interest on the entirety of the balance in our account, not just on the amount of the loan. So the Union Bank has offered two options. One is the loan with a reinvestment option. So the loan is 3.55%, but we can reinvest it at 4%. So they estimate potential earnings of $71,000 with the reinvestment. Option two is a line of credit option at a 5.75% rate, which would cost the town $6,443. My recommendation is you go with the one that will make you the $71,000.
That's always a really hard decision, isn't it?
You're recommending option number one?
Option one.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sarah. And you need us to take action, or you would
Yes, please.
request us to take action on this tonight. As a result of that, would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure. I would make the motion to accept the Union Bank option number one, fiscal year 25-26 tax anticipation loan with reinvestment option of a fixed interest rate of 3.55% as a sole source provider.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? A motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Any discussion?
This to me is a no-brainer. I mean, we've got an opportunity here to work the money, so to speak, that is surplus for the month, not necessarily for the year, but for the month. And regain some of the, in fact, regain all of the cost. This to me is a good proposal, and it's the one we absolutely should be following up with.
I was hoping you would say that.
We'd hate to have that be a 4-1 vote.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous, Judy. Thank
So
you,
the
Sarah.
Union Bank will email you a DocuSign document for you to sign.
Okay, thank you. Okay, number 4, approved firework permits. We have 3 applications in our packet. The first one is Lacing Up for Cancer on June 28th. I believe we've seen this many years in the past. Michelle Parker, I believe, is in the room. Michelle, would you like to speak to this?
It's my first time, so Erica's backing me up just in case. So yeah, it's a family friends gathering and supporting everybody in their fight for cancer. It's our biggest fundraiser. And once again, we'd like to do the fireworks. It's a big part of the event.
Great, thank you. And Jason, I would assume, I'm looking at our chief, there's not been issues with this in the past?
No, we actually have an officer there the whole time as well.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
And North Star will do them.
Yep.
And North Star, I'm hearing, will put off the fireworks. Thank you. Any discussion from the board?
No, I mean, I saw Denny DiGregorio this morning. He had signed off on this, and the police chief has signed off on it as well. So I think that we have 3 applications in front of us. We could make a motion for all 3 if we're looking at including all 3, but I see no issue with that.
Sure, and just to be clear, the 3 would be Lacing Up for Cancer on June 28th, which, as I've already said, has been done in the past. The town of Morristown, 4th of July, clearly has been done in the past. And the 3rd would be Kathy DeMars, which has also been done in the past. That's an event on Earl Grey Road. So if you'd like to make such a motion, please do.
Well, why don't we talk about all 3 applications, and then
Okay.
I'll make one motion.
Okay. Any further comments about Lacing Up for Cancer? How about 4th of July?
I've got one question, Don, that's on the other two, and Chris, you might be able to answer this, because you said you talked to Dennis this morning. He hasn't, the fire chief has not signed off on town or Kathy DeVos.
He did today.
He did today, okay, thank you. Okay, then that gets to, yeah, good, thank you.
Any other discussion about 4th of July?
No.
Kathy DeMars, private event on Earl Grey Road, August 9th.
So I did have some questions about this one. I had asked a question this morning because it's in a residential neighborhood. It's on private property. We've got a certificate of liability that I believe indemnifies the town from the Vermont fireworks. My question was that there's a Lloyd's of London underwriter for the Kathy DeMars, Rick and Jamie Welcome property owners in the town of Morristown, but there was no limits on the Lloyd's of London, so I asked a question today about it. Do you want to talk about that at all? You, okay. My understanding is that because it's on private property and we are approving this permit, is there any liability back to the town? In terms of a house gets on fire or somebody gets hurt, is there any liability? And my understanding at this point is that there is not.
Not if we're additionally insured.
According to VLCT.
Okay.
Passive.
Right, so.
And we have spoken to Passive about this, correct?
Yeah, based on Chris's question, I asked Judy to request Tina ask the question of Passive, and they responded.
Yeah. So.
I mean, what you're saying is true of all three of these, not just the third application.
Right.
If there was damage from any of these, the town would have insurance to cover itself.
Right, I'm just saying is that it's a unique situation when it's out in a rural area, in a residential area, because the amount of fireworks that are gonna be fired off there is the same amount that's being fired off for our own 4th of July.
Yeah, so our insurance is not covering it. They have an insurance policy, and they are indemnifying us as additionally, so in case something happens. It's really standard.
So there's two insurance policies here. One is from Lloyd's of London, which covers Kathy DeMars and company. And the other one is a certificate of liability from the fireworks company.
Yeah.
So that was my question this morning, and I believe it's been answered, so I don't have an issue with it.
Okay, good. Okay, I would entertain a motion then.
And I would be happy to give a motion. I would approve the fireworks permits by North Star Fireworks for lacing up for Cancer Walk, the town of Morristown 4th of July celebration, and Kathy DeMars private property, and authorize Select Board Chair Don McDowell to sign on behalf of the Select Board.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Any further discussion from the board?
No.
Any comments from the audience?
Jerry Throne. I looked over the certificate of liability that Chris was talking about that's being provided by, I guess, the Vermont Fireworks Company. And I see a couple of inconsistencies there. I don't know if it matters or not, since I don't know if our insurance is primary or their insurance is primary, but whoever is, if there's, they could subrogate a claim. So we do have some liability. And anyway, in the description of operations, it says Kathy DeMars, Rick and Jamie Welcome, property owner, and town of Morrisville. It should be town of Morristown.
Morristown, yeah.
And on the next page, the endorsement, additional insured, it has the same incorrect description. It's the town of Morrisville and should be the town of Morristown.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that interchangeability of those two names has haunted us for many years.
Well, the location they're insuring is Morrisville. So, yeah, it's why we should be one, just saying, but, doing events, and, I know exactly what you're saying, but that's how insurance companies, they're,
I understand that they are probably going by the post office, which is Morrisville, not Morristown. But it says the town of Morrisville. There is no town of Morrisville.
yeah, which is, yeah,
Thank you for that.
point.
Other discussion? Okay, I'm going to say all those in favor of the motion as presented,
There's
please
a
say
hand up
aye.
on the, oh, is that our,
That's Judy.
okay, just checking.
So once again,
Second.
all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Erica. Number 5, appoint Tyler Masha as our health officer. Tyler's in the room if you have any questions for him, but I would entertain a motion.
Have fun.
Do you know what you're getting into, Tyler?
I love surprises.
He said he loves surprises. Okay.
So I would make the motion to appoint Tyler Masha as the health officer for the town of Morristown and authorize Select Board Chair Don McDowell to sign on behalf of the Select Board.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion by Chris and a second by Richard.
So I just have one
Any
question.
discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
Is that's an annual appointment, or is it in perpetuity?
I don't know if it's an annual appointment. I think it's an appointment now because we only have an interim health officer right now since our former health officer resigned.
Well, we can revisit this when we do our appointments after town meeting
Yeah.
next year. But I just, for now, Tag, you're it. After the motion.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Tyler. I am no longer it. Number 6, appoint Tyler Masha as our administrative officer, zoning administrator, AKA zoning administrator, and Brent Raymond as assistant administrative officer, AKA assistant zoning administrator. I have, in our packet, there is a description of the acting administrative zoning officer shall serve as a zoning administrator in the event of one of the following occurrences. And this was run by legal counsel today, and legal counsel suggested some edits to this, some additions to this. And so, just for the record, to be clear, I'm going to read what our legal counsel has suggested this should read, and I will, for those of you in the public that don't have this in front of you, I will stop and let you know where there's strikeouts and where there's additions.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
So we've got one that says acting administrative officer, which is the acting administrative zoning officer shall serve as a zoning administrator. The edits that I have is the assistant administrative zoning officer. So isn't it two different positions we're talking?
Yeah, and that's, yeah. This is really for the assistant administrative
Right.
zoning officer, right? Yeah. So thank you for that. So it says, the new version of this does say, as Chris just mentioned, Assistant Administrative Zoning Officer, the AZO. The Assistant Administrative Zoning Officer shall serve as zoning administrator, ZA, in the event of one of the following occurrences. Number 1, illness or incapacitation of the zoning administrator lasting longer than a week. No changes there. Number 2, with the permission of the zoning administrator during a period of prolonged absence, such as a vacation, bereavement, or other approved absences lasting longer than a week. No changes there. Number 3, there are a few changes here. In the event the ZA feels that they have a conflict of interest with a particular application, the ZA may delegate an application to the AZO to review and permit at their discretion. Prior to delegating an application to the AZO, the ZA shall seek guidance from the Vermont State Ethics Commission, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, or town attorney to determine if their struck out is perceived conflict of interest, if there is an actual conflict of interest, an addition of, or the appearance of one. In the event that the ZA is determined to have an apparent or actual, that's an addition, conflict of interest as defined in the Town of Morristown struck out, an addition of municipal code of ethics, then the ZA shall inform the AZO of the conflict and hand over the application to the AZO to review and approve. The ZA will prepare a memo noting that they have a conflict of interest with an application and that they are delegating the application to the AZO to review and approve on their behalf. So you can see that legal counsel has addressed this issue of conflict of interest. Number 4, most of this is an addition, but the beginning is not. With a majority vote of the select board at their discretion, the rest of this is an addition, or prior to such a vote being able to occur at the direction of the town manager on the condition that the AZO's appointment in such instance may only last until the select board can vote to either allow the AZO to continue serving as ZA or terminate the AZO's service as the ZA. And then number 5 is a complete addition. The AZO may hold any other position in the town that is not prohibited by law for a ZA to hold and shall be subject to all rules, regulations, policies, and orders, including without limitation, any duly adopted personnel or other similar policy. And then the end of this reads, and there's no changes here, the AZO shall not have the power to approve or review any application or make rulings on how to interpret the Morristown zoning and subdivision bylaws outside of the conditions noted above. The AZO shall be bound to interpret the regulations literally as noted in 24 VSA section 4448. So that is what our legal counsel is suggesting that we should be considering with this motion.
So I would propose to do 2 separate motions, one for the zoning administrator and one for the assistant zoning administrator.
Great.
So with that being said, I would move to appoint Tyler Masha pursuant to 24 VSA section 4448A to serve as the administrative officer, also known as zoning administrator for the town of Morristown, as nominated by the planning commission for a term of 3 years, who shall administer the bylaws literally and shall not have the power to permit any land development that is not in conformance with those bylaws.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. So a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous.
Then the motion for the assistant's position, I would move to appoint Brent Raymond as the Assistant Administrative Officer, also known as the Assistant Zoning Administrator, with limited duties as presented.
Second.
So I have a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Yeah, go ahead, George.
It feels ticky-tacky, but I think we had this issue when Brent took over for a period of time, and then you fixed it with a motion. How are we going to document number 2? with the permission of the zoning administrator, orally, in writing, somehow that we've got a document, because I think in the recent past, there's been some question about that assignment. That's why I'm asking.
It's a great comment, George. Are you, go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, I certainly learned my lesson there, so you won't have to worry about being properly documented.
Yeah, just documentation.
And number 4, if for some reason, God forbid, he was incapacitated as a town manager, I could, in the interim, according to this language, and I just saw this language today from Attorney David Rue, wasn't anything. Honestly, I tried to get Kevin to take on the,
Well, yeah, I thought that was the plan.
he's, after his experience over the last few months, he's not interested whatsoever because we,
Really?
yeah. So, I'm a lucky remaining. So, yeah, it'll be documented anytime he goes on vacation or it's obviously gonna be documented through the process if there's a conflict or perceived or appearance of conflict. But great point, and it will be documented unless there's some reason that he's unable to draft something in writing.
Are you suggesting number 2 should say with the documented permission?
I think it would be better. Obviously, I don't have any question with Tyler or Brent. On the other hand, I might have said the same thing a few years ago, and it gave us a hiccup. So I think it's cleaner with documented, but I'm not stuck on that.
So number 2 would read with the documented permission of the zoning administrator during a period of prolonged absence.
Or formal permission, because you put in a request for vacations, I mean, people don't just,
Yeah, I mean,
it's a notification.
if we clean this up to say in writing in somehow, unless I'm
Yeah, that's the
incapable of writing, hopefully that's not the case. But
So with the written permission or the documented permission, documented does give documented does make it could be a voicemail, could be
Do we
an email.
require, so, I'm sorry, do we require the employees to put in writing requests for time off, like vacations or?
You have to go through our payroll system, paychecks.
Do they have to write it
But I
down?
mean, like,
No, they just enter it into a computer system.
oh, they do, so they don't get formal approval. Most places
Yeah,
require formal approval.
It's not written down, it's put in through our paycheck system, requested time off, but they're not writing anything, they're selecting.
But it is
But
documented.
it's documented, yeah.
I like the word documented because it does give us a little bit more latitude.
So it's a flex, yeah,
Yeah,
if we're gonna go there.
Because God forbid Tyler is incapacitated, he could just verbally pass on that authority.
yeah, and that's fine with me, whatever helps you guys.
Yeah, okay.
My comment is not about you, Tyler.
no.
It's just past practice.
No, it makes sense, it makes sense, I wanna make sure you have it ironed out.
So your motion does end with as presented. Are you okay with the word documented in there?
Sure, we could do that as an amendment.
Okay.
So.
Do you
we
want
can
to
do it
make an
one of two
amendment?
ways. We can withdraw the second, I can withdraw my motion and re-motion it, including documented, and that way.
Let's do that. Let's withdraw the motion. Are you okay withdrawing the second? Withdrawing the second?
I'm just trying to
Okay, so.
see how much that actually would matter. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I'm just I'm rereading this, trying to figure out how much that word would change anything at the end of the day anyway, and is there a better way of
Yeah,
I'm
putting
just
it
thinking
down?
George is correct. I mean,
I'm not saying, I'm in agreement, I just don't know that word fits.
okay.
yeah, I think with permission is, I guess that's not a written, but
Okay, so he's withdrawn his second. I will withdraw the motion and I would remove.
Okay. Would you like to make a new motion, please?
6
Yeah.
and a half dozen.
So, this would include the motion to appoint Brent Raymond as the Assistant Administrative Officer, also known as Assistant Zoning Administrator, with the limited duties as presented, including the word in Section 2, with the documented permission of the zoning administrator.
Judy, you got all that? Okay, great. So I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
So a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Thank you, folks. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Number 7. Number 7, I know, 7 is the official receipt of the proposed 2025 zoning bylaws from the Planning Commission. I know Etienne Hancock is here tonight to answer any questions we might have. We do have a very sizable packet. All board members were given, looks like about 100 pages here to consider. I'm sure we've all looked at it. I certainly have over the weekend. I know for me, I would suggest that if there's any generic questions for Etienne tonight, now would be the time to ask them. I think digging into the weeds and getting into the details too far tonight might not be the way to go, but the board can change my mind on that. We do need to plan a public hearing, and we do have a proposed date and time for that, and I would like to get a motion and have that motion passed tonight if possible. And that would be the time to really dig into the weeds on this. And, you know, I looked over this in the weekend, and I'm very much looking forward to a presentation on these proposed bylaw changes, and that would happen at that public hearing, at which time we could, you know, find out the if nothing else, the reasons why, and which aren't necessarily in the packet. We could read between the lines, but that might not be appropriate for us to be doing. So at this point, I would just say, we do need to plan a public hearing date. I know Judy needs to have that information for tomorrow, so we can do that. We do have the packet in front of us, but we also have Etienne, the chair of the Planning Commission, here as well. So I would just say, does the board have any questions for Etienne at this point?
I just have a comment. You know, in looking through all of this, Etienne, I had mentioned to Judy and Brent that it would be nice to break this down into 2 silos. One is, this is what's cast in concrete because of the Homes Act. So this is built into the zoning bylaw changes, but it's statutory. And then the other silo is what the Planning Commission is proposing in terms of other changes, so that it might help streamline the conversation, because there's not going to be any debate over the Homes Act, and we need to understand what it means, but it's not a democratic process, whereas, you know, the other changes would be more open to discussion and public input.
And then, you know, our packet does speak to that a little bit. Thank you for that, Chris, because you're right. I mean, I know when I look through this, there's a lot here. There's a lot of red lines and blue lines and whatnot in here, but yeah, to make those,
Questions after receiving the select board memo?
to make those distinctions.
I think
Just to make those distinctions at the public hearing, I think would be great, when and if we have it.
I don't, because the memo that we got is clear, but I think in terms of the presentation to the public.
Sure, okay.
So that everybody understands, because it's pretty overwhelming, everything that's in this packet. And it just would, I think, make the ease of understanding the changes that we vote on, the changes that we don't have a vote on, clearer.
Etienne, do you have anything? Yeah, come on up.
Etienne Hancock, Morrisville. The question, well, my response is a question, and that is that, well, the preface is that historically, over my term here, Todd would basically read from his encyclopedic mind of all of the changes for the select board at this level, and of course the village trustees thereafter in a public meeting, and there would be no presentation per se. So if you could clarify for me exactly what you mean by the word presentation, I think it would be necessary for us to.
I guess what I'm thinking is just what you're referring to is that we would go through each of the proposed changes in the bylaws and talk about what those changes are and why they are being proposed.
Okay, so then, for example, this is the copy in my hands from the last time we were about to warn these bylaws when Todd was still here. So helpfully it has his notes in it. For example, if you had further questions tonight, I would flip through and look for the specific question in his specific note, where it does say, this was for Act 47, 1, and these other items are not. For this impending public meeting, when we say presentation, I think PowerPoint on the wall. That's just my.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm thinking something very similar to what Todd had done. And just, in fact, it's, right near the end of the packet is a summary of each of the changes and what's proposed, so that we would have some kind of a presentation. On each of these, some of these are really quick. Some of these are 2-3 second, conversations, but some of them obviously are going to be more than that.
Yeah, PowerPoint in color.
No PowerPoints. Thank you, Etienne.
And Don, do you want to just discuss the process of, this goes to open meeting and then, so people understand what the timeline is on this?
Yeah, so
offhand?
I'm gonna suggest a date for a public hearing tonight. It's actually in the packet. And we do need to have one public hearing and to consider these bylaws. We have to have one at least. One suffices by statute, after which.
For the town.
For the town, right.
And does the village have their own? Because then, once we have the town meeting, then does it go to the trustees? And then it comes back to us for vote, right?
That is what historically has happened, but go ahead, Brent.
It's a long
I've
process.
been talking with Scott Johnstone. I mean, the statutes state one thing, and there's been an agreement historically, and just waiting on some further information from Scott, legal counsel for Morrisville Water and Light, to proceed with updating you on that.
Okay.
Have not received it yet, so I can't comment on
What the village is gonna do.
right. But I'm working on it with Scott.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, for clarifying that. I'm gonna suggest, it's in the packet, that we have the public hearing to consider these bylaws on June 26th at 5:30. That is all that we would do that night, so that would give us ample time to consider these in detail.
June 26th, which is Thursday?
It is a Thursday, yes. I
It's
believe
within
that's
that
right.
win- It's within that
It's a
window.
Thursday.
It is a Thursday.
Yeah.
Why is it so far away, just out of curiosity?
We have to warn.
Got it.
So I would make the motion to set the proposed 2025 zoning bylaws public hearing for June 26, 2025 at 5:30.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion by Chris and a second by George. Etienne, does that date work for you? Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
times? Can we add times in there?
5:30?
I had 5:30.
Yeah, so the motion is June 26, 2025 at 5:30 here in this room.
I generally say we should do 6 because people that are at work can't make the 5:30, and since this is so important, traditionally, we have held it off till 6 so that people that are working can make it. I know it makes for a little bit later night, but, you know, I don't know, Anthony, do you have a thought about that? Do you think it's that important?
I won't dispute the importance, but the time of the meeting, I'm a little bit, I have to say I'm agnostic, 5:30 or 6, personally.
Anybody else on the board? Comments?
I don't think a half an hour is gonna make a difference one way or the other personally. If someone's gonna wanna be here, they gotta be here. Otherwise, it's
It's
important.
just driving. If they get out of work, it gives them a little more time, so they don't have to leave work early, but that's, yeah.
George, Chris?
5:30 works, I think.
Come on up to the microphone, please. Sorry to make you get up.
That's okay, I need to move more. No, I just said around setting a meeting, and you said here in this room, I don't know how contentious this meeting will be, but should we plan it in another room or a bigger room? If you guys think, no, we're only gonna have the 25, 30 people, not gonna worry about it, or a little overload, that's cool, but I didn't know what you guys anticipated around questions and the amount of people that might show up if they can get here by 6, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to anticipate, Dan, at this point. I know we've always had the public hearings in this room in the past, in the
Etienne,
last
do you
few
have a-
years.
Oh, sorry. Do you have an opinion on that? Do you have any sense, any hot topics in here that are gonna,
There is
Draw a
nothing
crowd.
about short-term rentals, so no, it shouldn't be that contentious.
that's what I was thinking too.
I do remember that meeting under the tent.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so,
On the 20th.
microphone? Sorry, Tyler.
So on the 20th, we had one member from the public there for the planning commission meeting. That doesn't mean that there won't be 30 or 40 people there, but I think if all of a sudden we get in here and there's, you know, a line out the door and we can't get to anybody, I imagine you guys would be able to continue it to a different day as well to take additional testimony if you need to. And maybe at that point, if it was a massive outpouring, you could always, you know, look for a larger venue at that particular time. Not ideal, but again, I wouldn't anticipate that happening, but I think it would be fine. We could also open this up if we get a sudden overflow. I know when you review, the DRB was reviewing the gravel pit down by, or the, not gravel pit, but the proposed development MSI was doing down by the airport. That had this whole area plus full. And that was, I think, one of the bigger ones that you'd had. So if this was able to accommodate that, I would anticipate be able to accommodate everything here.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. You're right. And we've had to open that area before, so. Okay, so I have a motion to have the public hearing on June 26th at 5:30 in this room. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous. Okay, thank you, folks. Thank you, Etienne. Number 8, discuss the future of the Morristown Cemetery Association.
Well, we've got an itinerant vendor application, right?
Pardon me?
That's
No?
old, that's old business.
Okay, I'm ahead of time.
So discuss the
Yep.
future of MCA. And I believe Dennis Smith is here, and come on up to the microphone, Dennis. Welcome.
As Don said, I'm Dennis Smith, president of Morristown Cemetery Association. With me tonight, I have my vice president, Ann Shackett, my wife, Lorinda, who is our endowment secretary, and Jane Payne, who is our treasurer. We have one other member who was unable to be here tonight. Subsequent to the select board meeting decisions of May 5th, concerning Pleasant View Cemetery, and while planning our agenda for our annual meeting on May 20th, members renewed a conversation we have considered in the past. At a meeting with town officials, we stated we wish to dissolve MCA. I had sent notification to our members and to certain town officials that I would not accept president of the association for another year. The growing complexity of the job with things like new state regulations and anticipation of changes to come has taken the fun out of this endeavor. Due to the years that some of us have on the association, we are ready to step down. Yes, I can already hear you saying, why don't you just advertise for new members? In the past, when someone has retired, we had people who had expressed interest that we could go to. We don't have that anymore. We hold meetings twice a year. We very seldom have guests attend those meetings, even though we warn the meetings in all required places, plus a few extra. Like most topics in town, there's no interest unless there's some controversy. Over the years, we have come to various select boards asking for help with growing problems. We received a lot of promises and little action. I would like to recognize past select board member Brian Kellogg, rest his soul, who became our select board liaison for a few years and helped get some considerations for MCA. The biggest help for me over the past few years has been current select board member Chris Palermo, with his vast knowledge of cemeteries, funeral business, state regulations, finances, and other topics. When I have a cemetery question, I don't Google it, I Chris it. We do thank town finance department for helping with recording our finances as far as they can go, but we still have to make the decisions. In the past, we have asked for help with things like the upper driveway at Lakeview Cemetery in Cadiz Falls. This is an accident waiting to happen. Cars have to exit by means of a steep, blind driveway as speeding cars travel along Cadiz Falls Road. I don't know if ever any consideration was given. One topic which is starting to surface and will need decisions made soon is green burials. This is a growing topic, very controversial, and I'm just not ready to handle it. We feel that we have built the association's finances to a stable position. Our investment policy does need a little tweaking according to state regs, but we hope someone else will adjust that. At the request of the town administration, we did not take a vote to dissolve at our annual meeting, although consensus was unanimous to move forward with that. We are here tonight to let you know where we stand and to ask for directions on how to proceed. Since operations are going to be needed to be established at Pleasant View, maybe this is the time to bring all Morristown cemeteries together. For me personally, this is a very difficult decision. My family has been, my family and my wife's family have worked with Morristown cemeteries over 50 years. And I feel like I'm letting them down, but this is the time. I'd like to ask Jane to continue the comments.
Thank you, Dennis.
Hello, my name is Jane Payne, and I'm the treasurer. I am also a finance director at Lemoyle Home Health and Hospice, so just for a little historical. I joined the association in 2012 after I buried my son Thomas in the Wheeler Cemetery in October of 2011. So I too, for different reasons, have a strong hold on the Cemetery Association. I joined because I drive by that cemetery every day, multiple times a day. I check on it. It's the only way I can check on my son. I had an interest in knowing what was involved, how I could help. We raised money for a gate, which, again, I haven't had time to get the gate done in these 13 years, but it's still on the agenda. What I initially learned was the membership was small. They were dedicated, but they were aging, as well as myself, but I was the youngest one at this point that I joined. As Dennis said, no new members. Those that left were not, their positions were not filled. Funding for the Cemetery Association was very limited, down to lot sales and interments. And we really required town funding to help with mowing and maintenance, which hasn't changed. It just has changed whether they had given it to the association checkbook or whether it comes out of the town checkbook. So when I came on board, we had a total assets of around $100,000 in a small investment account. I can't remember where it was, a small operating checking account, and 6 or 7 CDs earning 1% or less. We had $1,038 in what was labeled as an endowment fund. So what I learned was financial reports given at the meetings were pretty casual. It really had to do with sharing what the balances were in the accounts. It wasn't where the money was actually going or labeled or anything. So it was hard to know how much you had to spend, what you could spend. But it was started with $100. It was labeled as $100 per lot sale was supposed to be earmarked for perpetual care at that point that I came on. There was no running tally or accounting or clear classification of what that balance should be. So that was, again, how do we know how much we should be spending, how much should be set aside that we never touch? So that became really the first dilemma that I saw when I joined, as well as trying to get more established financial report. We met, someone recommended that we meet with the town accounting office for their recommendations because somebody said they thought Pleasant View had a policy of some sort that we could to do. So we did, we met with them and to try to create a reasonable starting point. So what, in your packet, what the result of that was a meeting on October 9th. And I also reached out not only to them, but also to the accounting firm that audits Lemoyle Home Health and Hospice, Barry Dunn of Maine and New Hampshire, for their guidance on this. So the resulting was that we created a board designated investment, which were funds that had been designated by the governing body of the association as endowment funds. These funds are also invested for the purpose of generating expendable income for a given purpose. But as they are internally designated, the governing body can decide to spend the funds at any time. But to spend the principal of that type of endowment fund requires board approval. It was impossible to recreate and determine the original principal amount of a current endowment funds based on the recommendation of the town bookkeepers to set a baseline balance. The MCA board had determined that the baseline minimum principal amount would be $70,000 to be adjusted annually by the Consumer Price Index. Any changes to the investments or decisions to spend a portion of the principal would require the majority of the board. Having said that, we have never touched that original allocation that we decided. I feel like the addition using the CPI index has gained more ground than if we tried to go forward with the $100 per lot sale because we don't have many lot sales over any given year, enough to generate a balance growing forward. So at this point in time, our endowment fund is at $91,105. And the town now adjusts that based on a CPI that we would provide on July 1st of each year. So not again until July of '25. We limped along with CDs for a while, just trying to get the best CDs. I had also inquired, because I had read in the original bylaws that we were required to have town auditors look at our books for financial, fiscal responsibility. When I inquired about that, at that point, there were no more volunteer auditors, I guess, that they used to have to look at like Boy Scouts and library and things. So we were not an official town organization that qualified to be underneath the town audit, professional town audit. So there was no one to audit us, even though we requested that. So we had to make an amendment to our bylaws to remove that criteria. So in 2015, I wanted to try to get our funds earning more money, and it was recommended, someone here in the office, that Todd Thomas had a personal hobby of investments. So we reached out to him, and he set us up, after reading the Vermont statutes of what was required. He came up with two, do I even have that here? Yeah. Two investment options for us that kind of met this stock fund recommendation and then a bond fund recommendation, both with Vanguard, which is a very reputable organization with very low funds. So over on the balance sheet, bottom portion of your handout, you'll see that our performance has done very well. Since inception in 2015, it's earned 7.8% overall since inception. So we have grown between income returns and market gain over that time. Our portfolio has doubled. So we are proud that we would leave our account in good standing. We have grown it. We have always looked at spending our money like we spend our own. Is it really needed? Do we have the money? We're not going to touch this amount. So I think Dennis can attest to that we did not do anything that was not immediate. As far as most of it's just tree removal, grounds mowing, and stone repair. We've never done any cleaning, although we'd love to. We just knew we couldn't afford it. So from 2012 to 2015, our focus was basically financial, getting everything in order, trying to get it moving forward, trying to get it so we could look at it and understand what was actually going on. In 2016, another set of problems came along when we were trying to work with local funeral home and realizing that once we weren't getting our money that was due to us for interments, started digging a little deeper to find out why that wasn't happening. Due to lack of documentation that was being submitted, I found out that my son's burial was not even documented in the town records. So at that point, I was just beside myself. So we worked hard. We did diligently trying to get those records in here, because if it happened to me, between the 4 to 5 years that it had been going on that I knew about, there had to be lots of others. So we worked and did everything we could to try to get those documents, trying to get the funds that were due the organization, communicated closely with the town all the way through it, and it was just a horrible experience. And at that point, that was in 2020, and I kind of said, I've had enough with doing the books myself when I asked the town to take it over as far as that portion of it. I couldn't move forward with that. But having said that, the part that they do, and as Dennis commented on, there's still things that they felt that I had to do as well. I filed the Vermont Secretary of State filing, the easy tax return, which is a push of a button, updating the endowment percentage balance that they need to change, requesting the investment statements to try to analyze the performance, getting the town trial balance. So if anybody that does financial statements or doesn't do financial statements, looking at a trial balance and trying to figure out if you're making money or not is a little complicated. So I would take that and put it into a format that the members could understand. So that was time consuming. The secretary position has been empty for the last 3 years. Dennis and I try to do our best to get something in there, but it's not always timely. It gets kind of done when it can get done. And I myself have served for 13 years, which is not nearly as long as these wonderful folks that have done it forever. But we're tired. We're just tired. And dissolving the association at this point seems logical because of all the other things that it has taken this long to get to this point. You know, it's taken 13 years to get the forms done, to get somebody that's actually helping Dennis and doing it the right way and getting the forms. And it just seems that this is the time to make it all one, as it's starting to be with all the new documents that have come out. And it's not to say that we don't want to step away and never be part of it. If there was, for me, if there was something like the Friends of the Cemeteries, whereas we would come in and be advisory, or, I mean, I personally am always going to keep an eye on my cemetery, and I'm going to straighten a stone if it's, falling over, but take the financial responsibility out, take all the administrative responsibility out, let us come in and help you on that level. But it's too much. It's too much. I have personal commitments with grandchildren and aging parents and trying to retire, and we just can't. And for me, if I can't give it my all, which includes time and interest, then it's time for me it's not good for the organization, and I don't want that. I don't want to leave something that way. I want to leave it in a good position of feeling good about what we've done and where it's going in the future. So, and we would be willing to try to figure that out together.
Thank you. Well, I, for one, want to thank you, Dennis and Jane and other members of the association, for all the time and effort you've put in over the years. It's been probably a thankless job, a lot of it, and certainly appreciate that. I know the cemeteries in town, they look great. You guys have done a wonderful job. I'll just very quickly just say, I've got a little granddaughter up in Craftsbury, and she lives just a half mile from a little cemetery in East Craftsbury, and that's one of our favorite places to go, just to walk around. And so they're beautiful spots in our town, so I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much. Thank you. Comments, questions from the board?
I just want to say, to sort of carry that forward, for many years, there's been, across communities in Vermont, there's cemetery commissioners, and somebody will always say, well, there's an open position for a cemetery commissioner. How hard can that be? Until they get a call from a funeral director on a Friday night on Memorial Day weekend saying they need to get a grave open. And having folks like Dennis and Linda and their board and all the other pieces that come to that, knowing that you have that institutional knowledge, interest, and willingness to serve, and do the things that they really do. I don't think the general public will really understand that because they'll have not walked in their shoes. But it's monumental, and that's no pun intended, what they've accomplished in terms of their finances, what they've accomplished in terms of their oversight of the cemeteries. I think the town of Morristown owes them a huge debt of gratitude.
Thank you, Chris. Well said. Anybody else?
I want to thank you also. I've run not-for-profits, and almost every not-for-profit is having the same issue. Everything's getting so legal and so difficult, and that you're passionate about something, but it just becomes not fun and your whole life. So I greatly appreciate you all. I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned the Friends. I had mentioned to Pleasant View that I really hope that we could somehow come to terms with keeping some of those lovely folks involved too. Because I think there's aspects of it. There's the business aspect of it, and then there's the community side of it that is really irreplaceable. So thank you, but I hope that we can find a way to get you involved and take advantage of your years and years of service.
I think that in terms of moving forward, the other things that we're going to talk about tonight are rules and regulations and forms and such, which incorporates all the cemeteries in Morristown. I would say, and certainly would look for Brent's input here, that we do this incrementally, that you work with administration in terms of the funds and any other things that you need to do to, slowly walk back your responsibilities as a 501c3. And so that it's sort of a seamless process, so that when there is an official plan in place and things are beginning to happen, and it has happened, that at that point you could dissolve your association, close out your state and fed tax stuff, and those types of processes. Would you agree?
Slower the better for me,
Yeah.
administration.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's the best for you all, but I'll be honest, what you all do and what Sexton does, I am very concerned about how the administration is going to handle all these added responsibilities. Not to say that we won't step up, and I really appreciate all the years of service that we put into town of Morristown and the cemeteries. But I do have concern with the workload, the continued monitoring. It's been a real pleasure to get to know Dennis. We'll really hope that we do come up with some sort of concept of keeping them as engaged as they want to be, so that the community can really benefit for as many years to come as they will allow, with their historic knowledge and dedication.
That was one thing that we did bring up at our annual meeting. We're not going away. We're going to be here. We want to see a smooth transition just as much as you do. And I think it's going to point out one of the problems that we have brought up for many years is that there needs to be, whether it's a commissioner or a director or a czar or whatever you call it, there needs to be someone with, just pointing at Chris here, all of that knowledge. And we've been making bylaws for 25 years that didn't even meet state regulations because we didn't know the difference. It sounded good to us. So, no, we're not going away. We're going to be here. We want to see as much of a smooth transition as you do, Brent. And You've got my number, so call anytime.
We know where you live.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks so much.
I guess I would just like to add my thank you to all of you. I've known Jane and Dennis for quite a few years, and it doesn't surprise me in the least the depth and the quality of the work that got handed out today. It's much appreciated, and as Jane said, I know what she inherited was not looking like this, and it's been a lot of work to get it to look like this. And I do hope that we can develop a friends group, or however it is, or be able to call on any of you for a question that is historical in nature. But thank you very much for all of your efforts for all of those years, all of you. Thank you very much.
I'll have to say, I echo everything that's been said. And I feel we're in a time where it's hard to get volunteers for anything, and people don't understand the institutional knowledge that is required to keep things going, and everyone wants to pay to play, and it really puts us all in a bad spot, and I really am appreciative of everything you guys have done.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm going to move on. We don't need to take action on number 8, so I'm going to move on to number 9. We have in our packets a set of rules and regulations that have been recently edited regarding Morristown cemeteries, and we also have a form in here. It's an application form. I know, having read through this, a lot of this was changing the name, Morristown Cemetery Association to Morristown Cemeteries. So Dennis, would you like to talk to these forms?
Yeah, because of the hour, I'm not going to go into it as deep as we should probably, but again, Dennis Smith, I've been a member of MCA for about 25 years and president for around 20. I have also served as interim sexton for a short period. I also work part-time for 3 funeral homes in the area that do a vast majority of the interments in our local cemeteries. Cemeteries in Morristown have been overseen by 2 associations for over 100 years, each developing their own rates for lots and burials, their own rules and regulations. Recently, with the help of the town clerk's office, each created their own forms to be used when work is done at the cemeteries. Because each association has its own rates forms, this causes confusion not only to our sexton, the staff at the town clerk's office, families, and funeral directors. This may be a good time to unify all of the cemeteries by creating one set of forms. Some work has been done to reconcile some of the differences. As Don has already mentioned, now I don't know if you all, yes, I can see, the yellow highlighted. I'll call them changes, but they're not necessarily changes. We took the 2 rules and regulations and fit whichever one fit best. We've done a lot of work on this, and the biggest change is simply from Pleasant View Cemetery Association, Morristown Cemetery Association. Now it's Morristown Cemeteries, period. Just running down through real quickly, in the definitions, we just found a couple of better definitions. One that I really want to point out, I get a lot of questions about, is perpetual care. Perpetual care, the term perpetual care shall apply only to the cutting of the cemetery lawns and to maintaining of access to and within the cemetery. Perpetual care is perpetual care of the cemetery, not the monuments. Families are responsible for their own monuments. Another problem we are coming into in the conduct section, cemeteries are sacred ground. Yes, we don't mind if you take your pet for a walk, assuming you've got your dog and you'd be able to clean up and all. But it's not a place, when you finish your burial, to have your reception there. We'll get into that a little bit deeper. But the conduct is getting atrocious at the cemeteries. A lot of this, other than just changing the names, we added a little bit of wording to make it a little smoother. Now, to say this was a change, dogs and other companion animals are not allowed in Morristown Cemetery unless leashed. Owners are to clean up after dogs or other animals. Pleasant View did have this in their rules. All loose dogs are subject to removal and impoundment by the Morristown Animal Control Officer. So we're making sure that gets into the final set. It isn't really a change, but Morristown did not have it. A lot of the changes also are actually definitions, letting the sexton know what his job is and letting families know what to contact the sexton about. A minor change, now it says the town and the sexton will have the final authority deciding opening and closing the cemetery for the burials. That's the opening in the spring, the closing in the fall. The president of each association and the sexton used to do it, but now it's your call. Okay, this was the one I wanted to stress. Post-service committal receptions are prohibited. A brief time of visiting following a cemetery committal is allowed, but not to interfere with the necessary operations to complete the burial. Now, I don't know if everybody is aware, once the service is done, somebody has to close the grave. If it's a full traditional burial, that involves a vault company and grave diggers. If you're gonna stand around for a half an hour having some kind of reception, you're holding up those people that may have other business to do. There will be no presence of alcohol or food in the cemetery. We felt that was necessary. Last year, there was a reception that went on for almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
In a sacred cemetery. Again, I'm going to just try to hit some of the difficult ones here. For instance, if you have a rather large lot and grandma and grandpa are there and some parents, and there's a family stone and some foot stones, yes, the rules say one above ground family monument, but if grandma and grandpa have already got a short, I mean, we will allow match what is there. It doesn't exactly fit the rules, but you have to allow. All of the arrangements, this again goes back to the sexton's job. Everything needs to be done through the sexton. If you don't know, Mike Buchanan, I don't know if any of you know Mike.
Yeah.
He was appointed sexton a year or so ago, doing an outstanding job. I want to continue working with Mike. We often have 2 burials in different cemeteries the same day, and Mike and I help each other cover for extra burials. There was, well, I'll wait till I get to the forms on that one. I'm sorry, I'm going through this so quickly, but I'm trying to save a little bit of time here. Again, everything is in the judgment of the sexton. We did clarify, it always said flowers in baskets after 5 days could be removed if they were unsightly. We did clarify within 5 days after a funeral, so that that does give us some leeway to pick stuff up. The receiving vault, does everybody know what the receiving vault is? Up across from the old Copley Hospital, there's a little brick building, mainly used in the winter, when full traditional burials cannot be buried in the winter. They go into the receiving vault. We did quite a bit of changing there. Again, not really changing, but clarifying and just to let everybody know what is going on there. A lot of this is all legal stuff, which, as I say, we're just sick of. I hope people take the time to read through it. For anyone interested, now in all of the cemeteries, a lot is 4 feet by 12 feet. You may place 1 full traditional burial. You may place 1 full burial and 2 urns. Now, the reason we've made this available, if Don wants a full burial, but his wife prefers to be cremated, there's no reason to like 2 lots. Those 2 can go on 1 lot. And if there is no full burial or full burial anticipated, there can be up to 4 urns buried on 1 lot. There are some cemeteries in MCA, namely Randolph, Mountain View, and Plains, where we have designated cremation-only areas. Instead of a 4 by 12 lot, you buy a 4 foot by 4 foot, and you can put 2 urns, but you have to use a flat, flush marker. If we have them that close together, the mowing equipment can't be used. So we do insist that they are flat markers. And we did take a little bit of a leeway. Normally, you think of a military marker, which is 2 feet by 1 foot. If a couple is going to be interred in a cremation lot, if the name is a little bit longer, you know, and if we will allow, instead of 2 feet by 1 foot, they can go 30 inches so that they can get the name and information on. But again, flat ground level marker. Foundations, as always, they have to have a foundation under any above ground marker. Normally 4 feet. If it's a huge marker, it could need to be deeper. Again, up to the authority of the sexton. Simple stuff like the corner posts. When you buy a lot, now you buy the corner posts and we install them. No more options. And the only thing, corner posts cannot have raised letters for prevention of damage to the mowing equipment and such as that. Trees. Trees are a huge problem in cemeteries. The old white pines that have been there for hundreds of years, branches are breaking out of them, damaging historic markers. Both cemeteries have spent a lot of money taking down the trees. And since I believe 2011, we do not allow trees, bushes, plantings that might spread. We're trying to prevent this problem down the road. I hope you will, take time. I would like to see when we get this all sorted out, I'd like to see some press releases clarifying some of this stuff. Another big problem is work has to be done by insured contractors. I don't know how many times I get calls. We got Grandpa's ashes. We want to take them over and bury them. No, you don't do that. I know it's $350 or whatever for plays or whatever, but we cannot have people just dropping into the cemetery and burying their family's ashes. That has been quite a problem. For time, I'm kind of going to quit there unless Chris can think of any specific ones that we should mention.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, Dennis, is that, within these rules and regulations, brought into fact that, like disinterments, there are state statutes, and so there's references to this in terms of the process, that it's not just a matter of digging somebody up. There's state statutes that regulate how disinterments take place. The receiving vault, the only receiving vault in the town is up here at Pleasant View Cemetery. I had augmented that made sure that the receiving vault was for temporary use only. That no unembalmed bodies are allowed to be placed in the town receiving vault because it's not climate controlled. So that if somebody had an individual and they said, well, they didn't want to be embalmed or in a casket, we need to put them in the entombment vault, we are not going to take on that liability as a town. So it specifies that. Beyond that, I specified that all human remains must be removed from the receiving vault no later than June 1st. In my practice, we ran the entombment vault in Waterbury. We started to see families saying, well, Grandpa died in December. September is a beautiful time in Vermont. We'd like to come out next September and have the burial. So in these rules and regulations, we put an end date in terms of when people needed to be out for full burials. Beyond that, a lot of this stuff is brought things up to speed in terms of state statutes. The only thing that I was remiss in, I think, in this is at the very end of this, when we go to adopt this, it says adopted by the Morristown Cemetery Association. I didn't take that piece out. So it should be the Morristown Selectboard. But other than that, I've sort of read through this ad nauseum. Dennis has gone through this. And the only other thing that I will say is that in the Pleasant View Cemetery rules and regulations, they have a section in there, a very brief paragraph about mausoleums. The only thing it talks about is access into a mausoleum. And I would propose that we would sit down and take a look at an actual ordinance in terms of mausoleums in placement, because if anybody's been in the cemetery, you put a two-person mausoleum on a two-grave lot, it takes up the whole thing and it overshadows pretty much everything else beside it. So I would propose a conversation down the road to define an area for mausoleums, which would allow for easy access, that takes that issue off the table. The construction of the sub-base, the base, and the installation of the thing, and also an endowment fund for each of them, of the mausoleums, because long-term, when joints start to erode and doors don't fit right and stuff, that there's money set aside for long-term maintenance. So that's one piece that came out of the Pleasant View that we need to address. It's not forgotten, but I think it needs to be fully vetted in an addendum. So other than that, I don't have anything else. Thanks, Dennis.
Well, I think the next page, or did anybody else have questions on?
Nope.
I actually have one question.
Yes.
I was up in Cabot and drove by the cemetery at night, and I discovered that solar lights are now a big thing on all the graves. Have you guys seen this?
Speaks to it.
Okay, it does. I didn't see it because
Yes.
I was amazed.
We,
I don't know if you've seen it, it's like a circus.
and I don't really care about the solar light,
Yeah.
but everybody's going over to the dollar store, getting the $1.25 lights
Yeah.
that last about a month, and then we've got a broken light that we've got to clean up. Yes, artificial lighting is addressed.
I just thought living next to something like that would be.
Yeah, so they are allowed. Solar lights only are allowed in the cemetery.
And they are, I think, go by this, whatever the name of the cemetery is in Elmore. And there's many.
All right, well, there you have it.
And we do have eternal flames.
Yeah.
At the Mountain View Cemetery.
Right.
There are 3 eternal flames, gas-powered eternal flames.
Yeah, it was like a circus. I haven't seen it.
I think the next page you might have discusses the new rates that we want to enact or enact. Pleasant View went to $600, I believe, last fall. We tried to stay at $500 on our side, but I think for uniformity and, as Jane mentioned, sales are way down. So there will be one price for lots, and that'll be $600. As I mentioned, the sale includes corner markers. Gray ones would be $300, and that is installed. Colored ones are $350. The 3 cemeteries that I mentioned that have cremation-only lots, those are now going to $300. The corner markers actually are there. That's how we want to keep those the same, and we've set out our pattern. So the corner markers are included in that 300. And of course, the deed recording at the town clerk's office is $15. The receiving vault, and this is for the winter season. When I was working for Mark Faith a few years ago, there was no charge for Morrisville people. A couple of years ago, Pleasant View decided to go to, I believe, 150. And I got a call from a funeral home asking what the rate was, and they were astonished it was that low. So we've decided residential will go to 300 and non-residents 400. We serve, in the vault, we have served like Elmore and Wolcott. I'm not sure, Hyde Park does have a vault, but I'm not sure if they're using it. I think it links, I think, so we may even be including Hyde Park. I think from what we've heard, those are very reasonable rates. Grave opening and closing. Now, we only have anything to do with one side of it. We prefer Clegg's memorials to open and close. Their rate is now $750 for a full burial and $350 for a cremation. So if you add on, we have a cemetery fee, call it what you will. We've called it a sexton's fee. The town has to pay the sexton, but the people that use the sexton, they can kind of offset it a little bit. It's also a maintenance fee if damage or anything is done at the burial. That fee is $150 for a full burial. That money goes to the town. And $100 for a cremation burial. So it looks $900 to open and close a full burial. Looks like a lot, but it is including all of the charges. And of course, the grave diggers do charge extra for Sundays and holidays. That's another $150. I think the thinking is we would kind of like to get these rates going as soon as possible, maybe when the new year starts, July 1st. The only question, I just happened, I did a service with Northern Vermont in Hardwick, and I did one with the Groseliers also in Hardwick. And they would like a little bit of warning. They may already have services scheduled, so they need to know if we're gonna allow them to keep the old rate as long as it's already scheduled, or if they've gotta go to the grieving family and ask for more money.
So I think the intention there is that if we use the July 1st, assuming that we approve these, the July 1st would be the date of effect for these things. What I would do would be, I have the email address for every funeral home in the state. So all of Northern Vermont, what I would propose to do is to send the funeral homes a copy of the rules and regulations, the fees, the forms, all of those things, so that they have that, and anything that's already pre-scheduled beyond July 1st, when these new rates go into effect, they would be grandfathered in. So, I mean, it's...
Yep. I don't want to be doing that.
Okay, I think the next form you have is the internal order. This is what the family fills out at the time of the burial. As you see now, all 8 cemeteries are listed on one form. This will help the funeral homes and the staff here at the office. They need to know dates and times. The sexton normally would be helping them fill this out. You notice they need to know the section, the lot, and the grade, which infers that there's a deed. You can't even set a stone or do a burial with the promise that you'll come back in September and buy it. You need a deed so that you have the location. The only thing we did change on that form, I believe, other than the name, we now have included the $100 and $150 fees right there so that they can see them. And we also spelled out better that the sexton is who they are working with. There's a second page which kind of gives some examples of lots, and especially with a cremation, they need to mark the exact location of the urn, so that if somebody else comes along, we know where the urn is. We have to have an exact location.
The other thing on this too is that before this goes into effect, the hyperlink to morristownvt.gov MCA, that Judy will need to work her magic on that so that it goes to the town website in the appropriate category.
The next form you should have is a work order. Again, just one form, all of the cemeteries are listed. Again, you need the exact location, so that we know there is a deed. Most of the changes on that one were Morristown cemeteries. You see all of the yellow. This is one, you see you are listing a contractor and, or the company performing the work. I'm not, yes, it does say here, installed, performed by a contractor with a valid certificate of insurance. And I believe the finance department has a great big binder with certificates of insurance. So even going to setting a stone ahead of time or something, there has, you don't go do it yourself.
No.
We have to have insured people. This one covers, well, it doesn't, it covers corner markers. This was back when you kind of had the option to do it yourself or whatever, but now I can't think of a time. Maybe if you've got an old lot and you want to put some markers on it, but normally corner markers will be taken care of at the time of purchase. It does specifically say commercial cleaning. Since the family is responsible for maintaining their stone, we have allowed families to clean their own stones without bothering with permits and all. We don't want to make it any harder for them to do the job we expect them to do. So, but if they get commercial people coming in, we want to know what they're using for chemicals and when they're going to be there and things like that. I don't see anything else, Chris, do you want that?
Now, again, the hyperlink is the only other thing that needs to get.
So basically, those are some of the forms. You know, we wish people, we know you don't like to talk about death until death gets here. We wish people would read the regulations. We wish people would see what they need to do to set their stones and, one problem, when you do a cremation burial, the certificate of cremation should be with the urn. People that wait 5-10 years before they do the, hey, you've got to find that certificate of cremation. We have to know who is in that urn. And as I say, I wish people would take the time to know what they're getting into prior. I guess unless anybody's got any questions, I think enough of your time.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for all the clarifications and the thoroughness. Thank you very much. That was great. At this point, are we looking to adopt these forms tonight?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. With the, with mausoleums coming in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a suggestion.
Yeah, right.
I think also Pleasant View Cemetery doesn't have cremation lots. I think that there needs to be, a discussion about location of cremation lots, because that is 85% of Vermonters' choice today, so.
And if we do it tonight, then we can get that fee schedule out
Yeah,
ASAP.
as well as the new forms and whatnot. I think it would make sense.
Okay, well, I would entertain a motion if somebody would like to make one.
Okay, I would make the motion to adopt the Morristown Cemetery's rules and regulations with the amendment of the very last page saying adopted by the Morristown Selectboard this day of 2025, as well as the work order permit, the interment order, and fee schedule.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Chris and a second by George. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous.
And I think that, we'll work together on getting the
Yes.
final documents.
When I get them all done, I'll need signatures.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much, folks.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Okay, moving on. We have under old business, street treats, interim vendor, Brittany Benway. Had a feeling that was you. Hi, Brittany. I know at the last meeting, George and I weren't here. I'm sure George read the minutes, I did as well, and I know there was a discussion of bringing an ice cream truck to town, and I know you're here to perhaps clarify some of the discussion from last time.
I'm hoping I can.
Go ahead.
So I know you guys wanted more clarification on dates and times. So generally how I do things, I guess, is I kind of put like a social media post out and ask the people what day they would like to see me, what would be, the best day for everybody in town. I do only have like 3 days a week that I'm working with right now, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I was kind of hoping maybe people would lean toward Wednesday with like Kobe's being closed that day, so there's one less choice for ice cream. And as far as like the, how long the route will take, it's kind of hard to say. I'm kind of carving out like a 3-hour window. I'm thinking 4 to 7. That way the kids are home from school and I can catch people, hopefully before or right near the dinner time. And it's strictly residential. No, I don't even plan on going through the building unless I'm just getting from one residential area to another. I'm just looking for the old school music in the neighborhood. Pretty simple things. I do have, like a list of street names that I was kind of hoping to hit. So I'm thinking like coming in 15A maybe stopping at the Lamoille View Apartments, hitting Summer, Union, Court Street, up Upper Main, over Lower Elmore Mountain Road, hitting Maple Street, Congress Street, coming out on Randolph Road, hitting Best Street, Jersey Heights area, coming out by the All Saints Catholic Academy, hitting Bridge Street, Brooklyn Street, maybe Wobbin Street, Wilkins, and then heading out on Harold Street. We're calling that a Main. It does kind of depend on, how many people come out, how long it's gonna take. My preference is always to not be on the street, when it starts to get dark. Safety reasons, I've got kids running toward my truck, so I don't, once it starts getting dark, I like to be done for the night, which would also require a little bit of leeway as far as time goes, because as fall comes, I might kind of change, to 3 to 6, or, to try to beat the dark hours.
Right, thank you. So just to clarify, it would be 1 day a week that you'd be doing this?
Yes, just 1 day a week.
And a 3-hour trip, approximately 4 to 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. And just the residential areas?
Yep.
Yeah. So I take it you won't make it up into the Morristown Corners area, Mud City Loop, no? Okay, no. I'll tell my granddaughter. I know, besides George, you guys had a chance to talk about this at the last.
We
last
did.
meeting.
The difficulty, and thank you for enduring our meeting tonight. It was difficult to have a conscious conversation about all of the what-ifs without having you here to answer questions, and that's predominantly why we tabled it, to have an opportunity to get some input from you and whatnot. I think that you've answered some of the questions. I mean, Morristown is open for business. It should be open for business. New and exciting ventures. I guess my only question for you is, what other towns do you do this in?
Currently just Hardwick.
In Hardwick? Yeah, and that's worked out pretty well for you?
Huh?
That's worked out well for you?
Yes, it has. Yep, I stick to 1 day a week because I do, random events. Like some people might have seen me at Wednesday Night Live last year. And that works great, but it's not the same as, hearing the ice cream truck from down the road. And, so I kind of wanted to get into that aspect, but, I do Rocktoberfest usually and, things like that. So I don't want people, sick of seeing me. So I think 1 day a week is plenty to have people look forward to it. And
Okay.
hopefully it's well received.
Yeah, go ahead, George.
Brittany, most of those streets that you just identified are quite residential, but Bridge, and I think there were a couple others struck me as high traffic areas. And I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but what's on the back of the truck to let people know? I mean, you're gonna pull over as best you can, obviously, but on some of those streets, that's without warning, without being able to see.
Might just be to get from,
So not stopping and selling on those streets.
Yeah, not necessarily. So,
Okay.
I mean, there's
like Bridge Street and Brooklyn Street, I think it would, there's a few houses there, but if it's not safe
Yeah,
to stop.
those are the kind that I have concerns about your safety, the driver's safety, and now obviously the kids' safety, who are hopefully coming to, and their parents, coming to buy something without something. I assume it's like a box truck, or it's a typical ice cream truck.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Something there with either flashing lights on it or whatnot, if you're gonna stop. If you're not gonna stop on really the main thoroughfares that get people through town,
Yes.
then I don't have a concern about it. If you're on Wobbin Street, we don't need a lot of bells and whistles,
Right.
just your music.
So I do have a stop sign that I can, swing out with lights on it.
Okay.
I always, put my blinker on, of course. And then, so like if I'm going through an area that I don't plan on stopping, I'll turn my music down.
Yeah,
So, if they don't hear music,
Sure.
they'll know that that's not.
you're just going through, but it's not a sales opportunity. Yeah,
There's that parking right there on Bridge Street too, where you can actually get off the
yeah, that's true, yes, yep,
road.
there is, yep. Okay, thank you.
I just have concerns. I love I love the business, I love the idea. We're having such traffic problems in Morrisville. You mentioned Congress Street. People have been here talking about how it's now a a racetrack. I drive down Randolph all the time. And so I just came from Price Chopper and sat in bumper to bumper, the traffic was backed all the way up to the old funeral home. You know, so I have, and because I do events, and I have huge concerns about, you know, kids running, because people are just flying everywhere, even in towns. And my other concern is, you know, the music. And I know it's a real short period of time, but, you know, are people going to complain? So I'm just thinking ahead about, is this going to come back to haunt us, where people are angry about and never quite knowing where you're going to go?
So I also, before I do my neighborhood route, I've got an app that I share on Facebook, and it's a truck tracker, so you can view
Cute.
where I am in live time.
Yeah.
So that kind of helps people find me, and I try to encourage, you know, people to gather, you know, in one, you know, if you know, your neighbors and everybody try to, you know.
Do you have like kind of established places you stop, you know, rather than just random? You know, because there's certain places to pull off where I used to have an ice cream truck that came down my road, and, you know, we always knew that they always stopped in front of this one house. You didn't run out to find them. You knew, you know, that it was coming and that you went to that spot, and it worked out great. So that's what I'm kind of thinking of is.
That's what I'm hoping that it'll come to.
It'll evolve to.
Yeah, it kind of depends on, you know, who wants me where and how many people are out. It's kind of trial and error, I feel like, on my end, with knowing how long the route's gonna take and where the best place is to go.
And just on a business standpoint, I'm just curious that with the cost of gas and with that, and because I do events, that it wouldn't be more profitable. I just saw on Sunday morning over at All Saints, it was soccer, and all I could think about was, well, if I were a food truck.
Yeah, actually, I'm going there on Monday, so.
Yeah.
But it's more just the nostalgia, you know.
Yeah,
the kids hearing
it's
the
charming.
song, you know, running out.
Yeah.
That's more what I'm after, and just trying to bring, you know, here.
Yeah, and have you had any complaints in Hardwick?
I haven't.
That's a very kid-friendly communal town.
Yeah, no, it's been great so far.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that we're not so friendly here. I just, you know, you
Now,
know,
Laura.
I just don't want her to get a lot, you know, and us being caught up in this, people are, you know, here comes this music truck, you know, just, because we haven't done it, and we've had huge trouble with food trucks, and, you know, it hasn't been a pleasant trip here doing food trucks.
Maybe a little
so.
street treat will improve their disposition.
Well, one would hope.
Richard?
I think this is a great idea. So your time, like you indicated, like toward the later part of the year, you know, it's going to be starting to get dark in another 20 days. I know. So
about a Debbie
Richard.
So
Richard
and I don't know what your schedule is, but I think one of the concerns that we had at when we talked about this last time was the time. And I would say maybe a recommendation of like a 3 or 3:30 to dusk time period. And you seem like you're pretty set on one day in particular.
Yeah, not, you know, any specific day, but just one day a week, whatever
Okay.
works for people.
I don't know if on the application that says that, I don't know that it makes a difference to us as a community. I don't know that I would have any issue if it was Tuesday or Wednesday. And where I was going with that is, we've had not a complete weekend without rain since November. So for you, you're not selling any ice cream if it's doing what it did on Saturday. So that's the other piece for you. So I don't know if that's something that we should consider if we want to adopt this, is maybe an option of one day a week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, or something that worked, just to make, like I said, I'm in favor of it. And if there are concerns that we come into, I feel like we could work together to remedy anything that happens.
You know, I think as Brittany presented it, it was a preferred day, was
Yes.
Wednesday, but
as
you're saying, it's obviously weather
Yeah,
dependent.
but the way the application is written, it says a day.
It says one day,
Or it
but it
says
doesn't
one
say
day.
each.
Yeah, that was just what I was.
Yeah. Well, for me, there's nothing more quintessential than an ice cream truck in America going through the neighborhood and pulling little kids out on the street. And, Laura's, addressed the, safety concerns, but I trust that that's something you're going to be thinking about as you're driving around. I think, personally, I think it's a great idea, and I think we as a board, we need to embrace new business opportunities in town and support new business opportunities when they come along. I think this is a wonderful example of one. And I think I think about people coming to town they're moving into town, thinking about a nice town to move into, a nice neighborhood to move into, and I think an ice cream truck going down the road is only going to add to that ambiance.
And just, it sounds like you've talked about it, I just want to know for my own sake when people come, that you're cognizant of who's selling ice cream, because then we have Zach's. Because I know that's a huge thing with the food trucks, is that the people in town have been very, very vocal about, that they're brick and mortar and they're paying a lot of money, and they don't want competition that's basically undercutting them. So it sounds like you've, are addressing that, and that you won't be like down near Maple Fields or.
That's definitely not,
I
where
just-
I plan on being.
Because that's gonna come up, and I just wanna have the right answer to.
And I could be wrong, but I'm assuming most, places do scooped ice cream or creamies too, where we only do prepackaged, old school, good humor, type ice cream, so.
It's mostly packaged here.
Nope, not is it?
Yeah, the CVS, all these places have.
Yeah.
The Hoagies is about the only one that's doing currently, but anyway. So just
would-
because it's gonna come up, I wanna be able to.
So I would entertain a motion, if there is one out there.
I would move to approve the itinerant vendor application submitted by Street Treats Ice Cream Truck, permitting business to operate within town limits 1 day a week until November 15th, 2025, and authorize Select Board Chair Don McDowell to sign on behalf of the Select Board.
And I will second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Any further discussion?
I am for this, and I think Brittany is open to, if we have an issue,
Absolutely.
just sitting down and discussing it, either with the town manager or with the board, whatever the case might be, to resolve that.
Somebody's not gonna like that selection of music, it's coming.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's a real sour twist, it doesn't like that.
And that little granddaughter I was talking about, she'll be there.
So 4548 Randolph Road, this for future.
There was one other thing, Don, and I know that it was brought up last meeting, because I watched it, and it's on the insurance, and
That's been updated.
that's been addressed. Okay,
It's updated in our packet.
updated in the file, okay, retract.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous.
Again, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany.
They work together.
So I got a
And
question.
Kyle.
So I got a question for you.
Thanks very much.
Frank, who are we gonna include in executive session?
It should be a motion.
Okay, we're done.
But we have Tina and.
No?
We'll go through the rest of this.
Look at your written one instead.
Okay, we have warrants to approve. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion by,
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
so Judy, I have a motion by Chris and a second by Richard to approve the warrants. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous. Upcoming schedule, the next select board meeting is to be held in 2 weeks here in the room at 5:30. That would be a regular select board meeting. As you know, those of you that have been here tonight, it's not a possible date anymore, but we'll have that select board public hearing for the zoning bylaws that were presented tonight at 5:30 on June 26th. And the select board meeting following is scheduled for July 7th. That is a regularly scheduled meeting. However, I'm going to suggest that we cancel that meeting. And the reason is that our town manager will be out of town that week, and it is also a long weekend. It is the July 4th weekend. So I'm going to ask for your, that's my recommendation, that we cancel July 7th.
Don, just a quick note, it says Monday, June 26th. It should be Thursday, June 26th. Yes.
It does say that. Thank you very much. So, yeah, clarification. Thank you, Laura. So it's Thursday, June 26th is the zoning bylaws. So I'm going to suggest that we cancel July 7th. Again, it's a long weekend, long holiday weekend, and town manager will not be here.
Are there any warrants or anything that we need to address in a different way?
Yeah, so if you all move forward with that, we would want a motion for you to allow warrants to be signed by someone, Don.
Okay.
Okay. Should we do that right now?
Sure.
Okay.
I would make a motion to cancel the July 7th, 2025 regularly scheduled select board meeting and authorize Don McDowell to sign on behalf of the board the warrants.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
So a motion by Chris and a second by Laura. Spruce it in there.
I'm switching them up. I got Laura.
Okay, great. Any further discussion?
Or, just to be clear, we're completely canceling it, we're not gonna reschedule. So our next one will be our regular, okay?
Unless something
21st,
bizarre comes up where we need
Yeah.
some sort of.
Yeah, something, exactly, okay.
We do have the 16th, we have the 16th to consider that if necessary. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks. I believe we're,
Yes.
Unanimous?
yes, unanimous, sorry.
You can always.
Sorry. I believe we're about to enter executive session.
So I would move to find that premature public knowledge regarding employee contract negotiations would clearly place the employee and/or town at a substantial disadvantage.
I have a motion by Chris. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Chris, a second by Richard. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 That would be unanimous.
I would further move to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations, labor relations, and civil litigation to which the town is a party, and include town manager Brent Raymond, executive assistant Judy Alberry, and police chief Jason Luno.
Second.
I have a motion by Chris and a second by Richard. Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That would be unanimous.
I'm going to stay in here.
I would say that we are probably going to stay in here. Yeah, I don't see any reason to move. Thank you, everybody.
See you guys.
Thank you very much for coming.